your rebel movement. Western diplomats, you hear the same thing time and time again when you talk to them, that you are motivated by power. One Sudan watcher says you don't tolerate dissent, and anyone who disagrees with you is either imprisoned or killed. Basically what they're saying is that you are power mad, and that is the end to which you've been struggling for all these years.
If it was power per se that we wanted in the SPLM, we would have been satisfied already just with the objective of an independent Southern Sudan, and we could have the capacity to achieve this. But because we want fundamental change for our country, we want the unity of our country. See, it cannot be the vision of a power-hungry man.
When you look at the conflict between the north and south of Sudan, the figures are really devastating. 2 million people dead, 4 million people displaced. And yet the former US ambassador to the Sudan, John Peterson, expresses a very commonly held view in his book Inside Sudan, which was only published last year. He's a man who knows Sudan very well, travelled around the south, met you on several occasions. He said that your rivalry with other southern Sudanese, the control of your rebel movement and southern Sudan, is the current cause of the worst suffering in the south. Most of those 2 million dead have not been through killings, but through starvation, lack of food.
No, this of course are opinions of people.
Well, this is the ambassador of a country, Mr. Garang, an ambassador of a country which, at the time when he said this, when he was doing his research,
they write book and they sell books.
I said it's a commonly held view that he was expressing. I just gave him as an example of an opinion which many people hold.
But let us look at the facts. The present government in Khartoum has just, in the eyes of the world community, caused the displacement of 1.5 million people.
I was talking about the southern Sudan, because you are
we are talking about the cause of the suffering, which that writer is trying to attribute to the SPLA. The cause of the suffering in the Sudan is misrule in Khartoum, is governance in Khartoum. Since 1956, governance has been monopolated by a very small minority, centered in the Nuba Mountains, in Blue now in Darfur, in Eastern Sudan. What happened? They rebelled.
That's not what I asked you, though. You're not answering the question.
It is exactly what you asked me.
The question I asked you was this, John Garang.
These people rebelled because they were excluded. They fought the government, and as a result, you had the suffering that you have now in Darfur.
I will ask you the question again.
Which you cannot attribute to the SPLM.
I will ask you the question again. The 2 million people who've been estimated to have died in southern Sudan is largely as a result of southern on southern rivalry, and most of those deaths have been through a lack of food, which is something that your movement has to bear responsibility for.
Now, what you call the south on south is the government use, and I said this before, of a counter-insurgency strategy. We uses people against people, not only in southern Sudan. Now,
organizations like CARE, Save the Children, Church World Service, amongst others, say that the SPLA, which you lead, steals food destined for civilians and moreover prevents relief workers from operating in southern Sudan. Let me tell you what the International Committee for the Red Cross says. Your policy on food relief is straightforward. You are determined to prevent food relief from reaching government-held towns in the south in order to starve the population and force them to surrender or leave. A whole body of aid organizations are saying this about the SPLA which you lead. Does the SPLA steal food from civilians?
Definitely not, and we have
it's not your policy, as all these people say.
Definitely not our policy, and war, or any war for that matter. There are inadvertent acts that of atrocities that may have
been committed by forces who you control. Okay, if that Truth and Reconciliation Commission ever comes to light in the Sudan, they're going to be very interested in, aren't they, by reports, for instance, by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, other groups that say your SPLA has been guilty of severe human rights abuses like summary executions, indiscriminate attacks on civilians, torture, and this is on the southern Sudanese people whom you say you wish to lead. Let me give you one example of one atrocity that Human Rights Watch talk about. In April 1993, SPLA forces razed and burned Ayod and Uay in northern Upper Nile. Possibly hundreds of civilians were killed in indiscriminate shootings and deliberate killings. Many of the victims were so elderly or weak or sick that they couldn't run fast enough. They were among those burned to death inside their huts, which your soldiers knowingly set on fire. Surrounding areas were also attacked and looted. That is typical of thousands of civil...
What will solve it is what? Is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, is it? Because anybody can say all that you have just quoted.
There were thousands of incidents like that which are laid at your door. You, as the commander of the Sudan People's Liberation Army, must bear personal responsibility, do you?
Not when it has not been investigated and confirmed, not by allegations of...
These are not allegations, these are the same allegations that we're seeing in Darfur,
So let us investigate. Even in Darfur, we are asking for such a commission.
You've already said that there's genocide in Darfur. This commission that the United Nations is setting up to look into genocide hasn't in fact made any investigations yet.
I'm saying why it could lead to genocide. I said before, because of the government counter-insurgency strategy. The world firm, whether there is or there isn't genocide, the world should act now.
The same could be said of Southern Sudan.
To prevent genocide.
The same could be said of Southern Sudan, that you, as the leader of the SPLA, could also be accused on the same terms that the Sudanese government is for killings and human rights abuses in Darfur over Southern Sudan.
In Southern Sudan, we have signed 6 agreements with the government. We have essentially the core peace agreement. It has formed a Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Signed agreements, though, in the past. For instance, let's look at child soldiers. You signed the international conventions, the protocols on not using child soldiers.
Yes,
yet, the United Nations Secretary General submitted a report to the Security Council last year saying that your movement still has child soldiers in its ranks. So you sign bits of paper and yet you...
We absolutely have no choice.
Well, that's not what the United Nations Secretary General report said last year, is that you may be releasing some of them, but you're re-recruiting them, and there's every chance that the report due to be published in a couple of months' time is going to say that there are still child soldiers forcibly abducting thousands. That's the accusation that's being made.
Absolutely not true. There is no reason why we should do this.
Well, these are not my findings. This is the United Nations.
Instead,
the Naivasha agreement between you and the North of Sudan, you would be the Sudanese first vice president. Given that you're so committed to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and they are these allegations, as you say, against your movement, should you be accepting that post until the allegations of torture and human rights abuses against your movement are investigated? Shouldn't you really be saying, I'm not going to take that position until people make sure that I'm worthy, fit for that post?
What is the objective that we want to solve?